Hey everybody, welcome back. Now let's read about optional arguments. The following code is allowed and executes without any problem. Function square of x, return x times x, console.log square, for, true, and hedgehog. So couple extra arguments there. We define square with only one parameter, which we can tell by this part. This is the parameter list and there's only one. Yet when we call it with 3, the language doesn't complain. It ignores the extra arguments and computes the square of the first one. JavaScript is extremely broad-minded about the number of arguments you pass to a function. That is a very diplomatic way to say that. If you pass too many, the extra ones are ignored. If you pass too few, the missing parameters get assigned the value of undefined. Excuse me, the downside of this is that it is possible, likely even, that you'll accidentally pass the wrong number of arguments to a function, and no one will tell you about it. The upside is that this behavior can be used to allow a function to be called with different numbers of arguments. For example, this minus function tries to imitate the subtraction operator by acting on either one or two arguments. So we got a function in function declaration style. Minus takes parameters a and b. If b is undefined, return a. If you've never seen this before, I think we mentioned this for the if statements, but if you only have one line, you don't need to put the curly braces. I am not a fan of this or this syntax. I'm convinced that, especially when you're getting started, it's a much better idea to do this, to have your curly braces nice and lined up, and it's not going to look that different. But what I would say is that now the syntax is much easier to adjust. It's easier to make sure that you're not missing a curly brace. And this also speaks to the idea that programs and the reason that you program it's for other people and for you to read. The computer doesn't really need any of this fluff, as you saw, because we've just adjusted this from what it was, which looked possibly a little cleaner. I would suggest for all beginners though, try to use curly braces. It's just you're gonna have a better time is the way that I would describe it. But anyway, so we're checking to see if b is undefined, which we're basically told that if we don't pass a parameter, if we don't pass an argument for b, as we've done here, it's essentially going to just return the opposite of a, or the inverse of a, the additive inverse of a. Anyway, return a minus b, and as you can see, if we run both of these, we're looking good. Or if you remember from the other video series, we are in good shape. So if you write an assignment operator after a parameter followed by an expression, the value of that expression will replace the argument when it is not given. Now, I was actually not aware of this. I've seen it in other programming languages, and it's kind of cool to see it make it over to JavaScript. For example, this version of power makes its second argument optional. If you don't provide it or pass the value undefined, it will default to 2, and the function will behave like square. So this right here is the second parameter, and we're using the assignment operator to define a default parameter, which is cool, right? Because we could essentially describe this power function as being, square with some ability to kind of mess with it. So if we don't pass anything for the exponent, it assumes we want to square it, and it'll square to 16. If we do pass something for the exponent, it will not be replaced by 2. It's going to assume that you want whatever you called it with, and it'll raise 2 to the 6th power, which is nice. In the next chapter, gosh, I love this interface, because you can click it right here and just go directly to it. So we could click it, open it up, and be like, oh, cool. So there's some, and because that's the fun part, right? It doesn't even just take you to the next chapter. It takes you to the specific section in that chapter that it's referring to. Now, we're not doing it during this read through because it's a little bit funky to start describing REST parameters because we haven't described all the rest of the stuff in the chapter. But I just thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, let's go back to the link that we had followed. So in the next chapter, because they could easily just reference the next chapter and just bring you to it, but it's always nice when they bring you to the exact section they're describing. So in the next chapter, as we've gone over, we will see a way in which a function body can get at the whole list of arguments it was passed. This is helpful because it makes it possible for a function to accept any number of arguments. For example, console.log does this. It outputs all of the values it is given. This can be pretty cool because it can actually help you, put messages alongside of things. The result of calling the function should be, and then put that in quotes, and then the second argument is going to be whatever we think it should be, and so the result of calling the function should be 2. Now, of course, this doesn't describe anything of actual utility, but especially in the course that's associated with, well, I don't really like to mention the course with this because this is supposed to be like a free agnostic read-through, so we won't worry about that. But oftentimes, in other courses, you will see a console.log statement that is used to describe what the console.log is actually doing. Something about the idea of like, rather than having a bunch of console.logs that just output, so let's show an example. We see 16 and 64. Now, we know that that was the result of these two, but we could write messages in here that say something like, output without a second argument. And that gives us a little bit more of a defined idea of what that console output is, which is nice. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this section. Thanks for reading along with us. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.